King Arthur and his noble knights of the Round Table is a legendary story everybody knows. This myth is deeply rooted into the history of early England, and for centuries this legendary king was not a matter of legend, but a historical figure. But was he real? Or was he the concoction of an inventive writer? Hello, and welcome to History in 7 Facts. In the year 1191, any visitor or pilgrim of Glastonbury Abbey would have been welcomed by a large curious crowd peeking at a grave between two large crosses. There, 5 meters underground, the monks had discovered a massive hollow oak trunk, and in it the remains of a man and a woman. One of the monks jumped into the grave, opened the coffin and lifted a strand of golden hair with his hands, but almost immediately the hair turned into fine dust. Above it, under the covering stone, there was a leaden cross with these words written in Latin: Hic jacet sepultus inclitus rex Arturus in insula Avalonia. Here lies buried the glorious King Arthur in the island of Avalonia. Apparently these monks had just discovered the tomb of King Arthur and his beloved second wife, Guinevere. Or did they? This discovery was a bit dubious. For one, it came at a perfect time. The abbey needed money to rebuild after a fire in 1184 basically ruined it. The tomb of King Arthur would certainly attract lots and lots of pilgrims, and pilgrims donate money. At this time, King Arthur's legend was known throughout the country. Just 1 year prior, King Richard Lionheart joined the crusade and journeyed to Jerusalem with what was claimed to be Excalibur. So the hype was real. However, as you might have guessed, this discovery was a hoax, put into play by Abbot Henry, King Richard's kin. This didn't matter though, and the discovery of King Arthur's grave spread throughout the entire country. But how did King Arthur become such an important figure? It's all thanks to one of the greatest literary works of all time, The History of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth. Geoffrey was a Welsh cleric, one of the major figures in the development of British historiography. His book was extremely popular, although today it's considered to be historically unreliable. Geoffrey wanted to create a national hero, a glorious leader of the British. So he mixed together several Welsh legends and created a coherent and exciting narrative that covered nearly 2,000 years and the reigns of 99 Celtic kings. He called his work History and claimed that he translated into Latin an ancient book written in Britain. He was by no means alone in applying such tactics that gave an authentic flavor to works of art. But Geoffrey's Britain book was probably not real, and in fact we don't even know if by Briton he meant the Welsh language or Breton, a Celtic language spoken in northwest France in Brittany. In fact, the entire history of the kings of Britain is a well-crafted literary work that drew inspiration from both known events like Julius Caesar's campaign in Britain and less-known events. As far as we can tell, King Arthur is almost certainly the product of Geoffrey's imagination. Before we continue, I'd like to ask you one thing. This channel has no sponsors, so if you enjoy the content I make, please consider supporting these videos by becoming a patron. You can check out my Patreon page by clicking here, or find the link in the description. Okay, now we can move on to the next fact. If there was some real life inspiration for the mythical king, we will never know. No Welsh royal or noble family's genealogy mentions any ancestor by the name of Arthur. At least not until the first of the Tudor dynasty, Henry VII named his son Arthur in 1486. Some have speculated that the name comes from Arcturus, the brightest star in Ursa Major. He might have been a Celtic hero leading a group of warriors that liberated some parts of their country. Arthur could also come from Artorius, a Latin first name, thus implying that Arthur was a Roman or Romanized Celt. The 9th century Welsh chronicler Nennius described Arthur as a military leader that fought against the Saxon invaders. The Anglo-Saxons casted out the locals from their homes and had driven them into the poorer western regions like Wales, Cornwall and Cumberland. In this context, King Arthur's legend and his supposed return could have given the people a glimmer of hope that one day they might return to their homes. It was said that when Arthur died, a great fire ignited the skies, marking the end of a glorious era. I think it's safe to say that this was just another addition to the myth, although there are some scientists that believe that an unusually intense meteor shower did indeed occur in Britain in 540 AD. By the time Geoffrey of Monmouth was around, the legend of King Arthur had already spread, so it's not surprising that he chose this guy as his main character in his book. In his mind, Arthur was the king who fought against the Saxon invaders, but then went on to become a conqueror himself, taking Scotland, Ireland, Iceland, Norway, Denmark and Roman Gaul. He fought and won against the Romans themselves and was the equal of other great conquerors like Alexander the Great or Charlemagne. Geoffrey turned a mythical warrior into a great king. He also added the great wizard Merlin to the story. Nevertheless, even in those times, not everybody was sold on this great king. Many were wondering how on earth could a king called Arthur conquer half of Europe and fight the Romans without even one chronicler of the time mentioning any of this. But Arthur's story was a great success and spread throughout the continent. In the 12th century, Chrétien de Troyes, a founder of French literature, had written many Arthurian novels and gradually added other figures like Lancelot, Guinevere, and Percival. Creating legendary national heroes is not at all unique to Britain. Such heroes helped shape a national identity and a national goal. Most of the times, these heroes were real historical figures, but their deeds were greatly exaggerated. In other cases, the heroes were simply imagined. A remarkably similar tale to that of Arthur's is the German legend of Parsifal, a mythical hero in search of the Holy Grail. In France, Charlemagne is an equally legendary hero. In this case, he was definitely real, but the poetic tales of his deeds rival those of King Arthur. The legendary Swiss hero, Wilhelm Tell, was said to have refused to salute the Austrian governor's hat. As punishment, he had to shoot an apple placed on his son's head. Tell's defiance inspired the Swiss to rebel against the Habsburgs and ultimately created the Swiss Confederation. Only that, he wasn't real either. So you see, mythical heroes like King Arthur can be found all over the place. English chroniclers quickly overlooked the fact that Arthur was Welsh and adopted him as a national hero. In 1278, Edward I came to Glastonbury to examine the tomb of King Arthur. Edward was a great admirer of Arthur and loved every aspect of his tale. The round table that can be seen today in the Great Hall of Winchester Castle was made for Edward. But a 15th century novel, The Death of King Arthur, by Sir Thomas Malory, was the culprit for spreading the idea that this table was where Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table congregated. According to the same book, Winchester was Camelot, King Arthur's court. There will probably always be those who will search for Arthur, Camelot and Avalon, but the story of King Arthur transcends history. He was a king that never existed, but whose legends will never die. I hope this video was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. You can leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. The link is in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.